Hey, so welcome back to my channel. This is going to be a recap of Marry My Husband, Season 1, Episode 7. So it opens with a kind of recap of things that have happened thus far. Ji-hyuk and Mr. Yu are basically having a conversation. They figured out that they have a lot more in common than they thought. And so it recaps Ji-hyuk walking to the room to confront Min-hwan and Su-mi. It recaps her unfortunate demise. There's a flashback of, her with her father and him giving her the bill with the drawn heart. There's actually a clip in there where we see where she got the burn. It was from a coffee pot that broke and the hot water got on her arm, and she's telling him that she has to find a way to get Su-mi and Min-hwan together. Otherwise, her fear is that fate is going to throw her and Min-hwan back together, and she will, fortunately have the fate that she, inevitably had. So she asked him, okay, so how did you know about the restaurant? And he told her that, because he went to her funeral. So, we saw in the recap where he went to her funeral, and the mean girls were all in tears and talking about it. And she, obviously was curious. And he basically told her that there was a lot of sadness. And she didn't believe him. Like, she felt that her life was just so insignificant that it just never occurred to her that people would actually mourn her or miss her. So they eventually go to his apartment, and he has the cat. Now, I don't think that she makes the connection between the cat, but she just says that, I love cats. And so she, is very friendly with the cat. And so Mr. Yu is like, well, isn't there a way that you could just avoid it? What if you just run away? And she basically said that, her fear was that if Min-hwan could kill her in the future, that there's really nothing stopping him from doing that now. So fear is one reason why she didn't run away. And another reason, she told him that the burn that he has on his arm, that she had the exact same burn and the exact same place. So it seems like things are still happening, but it's happening to other people. And so then we have a flashback with Mr. Yu. Now, I thought that he got into the accident after leaving her service, but that's not actually true. In the flashback, we see that when he left her service, he went to start his car, and his car wouldn't start, and so he ended up having to catch a cab. Now, the cab driver pulled up, and in this flashback, the cab driver was actually looked like her father. And so the cab driver was like, you seem like you lost somebody precious. And he was like, maybe, I don't really know. And then he was like, I think I had a few chances to basically make my feelings known, and he didn't take it. The cab driver asked him, well, why didn't you? And Mr. Yu basically said, I didn't know it was my chance. And so, of course, the cab driver asked him, so what would you do if you were given another chance? And he said, I would take it. And he said the next thing he know, he went to sleep that night, and he woke up, and it was 2013. So he didn't die. He just woke up, and it was, that's just what happened. So we flash to Mrs. Wang, who clearly is having some marital issues. Her husband calls her and tells her that he's not going to be able to, pick up their daughter because he has an interview. And of course, she's like, this is some BS. Who has an interview at 7 o'clock in the evening? And then they flash to him, and he's sitting on the couch in his boxers and t-shirt playing the damn video games. So she gets off the phone with him. And Mr. Suk-jun, I believe it is, that's the grandfather's driver / security. She turns and they make eye contact, and there's like some familiar, like she knows him, they know each other, and they just make eye contact and kind of stare at each other for a while, and he kind of walks off. And then there's a flashback of her when she was a little bit younger. I guess she was just starting out at the company. And I don't really know the context of what happened. The clip just is basically was him staring at her and basically saying, I hate people like you. So I'm like, okay. And so Mr. Yu eventually gets to work, and he realized that Suk-jun he's moved to HR. And he, basically said that he was put there basically to investigate the situation. And so, of course, he's asking him about his connection to Ji-won, and that he knows that she, was at his apartment. And then he was asking him, were you thinking of giving her the lead project role, especially after her being seen at your apartment, which, can make it seem like you're compromised in some way or showing favoritism or whatever the case may be. And so he basically tells Mr. Yu that HR is going to investigate, but until then, she can't lead the project. Eventually, he goes to, he's down in the room and he's giving them an update on the team, on the project, basically saying that the project is going to move forward, but that Mrs. Wang is going to be the team lead, and Ji-won, Min-hwan, and Su-mi will all be assistant managers on the project. So, of course, he left, and of course, she runs behind him and trying to figure out why would, what's going on. And he basically said that, to kind of hasten the situation, he thought that it was a good idea to keep Min-hwan and Su-mi together so that hopefully things will move a lot faster. The following morning, he's going to talk to his grandfather, and his grandfather was like, I guess her name was Yura. I guess she works in, marketing or PR or something. And he was like, she did a great job dealing with the Wang situation. And so in the previous episode, when he was talking about like a man needs a partner, I knew that it had to be some corporate kind of situation, because apparently him and her, I don't know if that's her grandfather or father, the plan was that what's her name, Yura, and Mr. Yu would eventually get married. And so even the grandfather, even his grandfather admitted that, we know that y'all, didn't want to get married and didn't want to marry each other. And basically told him that I can't force you to marry somebody that you don't want to marry. And he basically told him it's going to be up to you to talk to Yura. I hope I'm pronouncing her name, probably butchering her name, about the situation, that he would talk to her grandfather. He's basically like, I've done him so many favors over the years. This really shouldn't be an issue. So the next day they're in the kitchen, and some of the coworkers are talking about the stock that he sold, that Ji-won knows is going to be, big in the future. And so apparently it's doing really well. And he is pissed. He's basically like, I sold the stock to pay you back. And do you even know, what's going on? And then he turned around and tell her, the only reason I'm still with you is because I still have TKU. Now, obviously she knows that TKU is going to be a bust in the future. So she's like, she's looking at, okay. So eventually she's back at her desk and she pulls up the stock because she hasn't, seen it that morning. And she's like blown away about how much it's increased. So around this time, he walks over to her, and of course, always had to have these side conversations with his craziness. So she gets up to go and talk to him. Of course, Su-mi is never far behind, so she's kind of trots over to her monitor to see what she was looking at. And so now she sees the stocks that Ji-won is invested in and how much they're making. And so in the next scene, you see her kind of contemplate whether or not to buy it, and then eventually she ends up buying some of the Regent something stock. So now they're in the conference room, and he's telling her how great, the restaurant was that he went with Su-mi, and it was great. He wanted to take her that night. And then he ends up asking her for money. And his intrusive thoughts again, he didn't say this verbally, obviously, but in his mind, he was like, if I'm ever going to have a chance of sleeping with Su-mi, I'm going to need some money. And because he sold the Regento stock, and just to pay her back, he doesn't have any money. And then he's like, oh, that's right. I remember you have all that money from when I sold the Regenta stock, which I know I'm butchering that name, so please don't put that in the comment section. You should still have that money. So he's basically wanting the money he gave her to pay her back for maxing out her credit cards and screwing up her financials. He's asking for that money, to borrow that money back. And so she was like, oh, I'm so dumb. I'm just such a dummy. I actually took that money and I invested it into insurance. So he is about to flip out. He's about to lose it. He's calling her stupid. She's dumb. And then her fear was that he was going to sell that TKU stock or whatever it was. And so she was like, you know what? I do have some savings. So, I can give you the savings so you don't have to sell the TKU stock. Like, she really don't want to sell that stock. She want him to basically lose his shirt. And then she was like, you know what, maybe we should all, do something tomorrow, all just kind of hang out. And so they go to have a picnic in the park, and then of course she makes an excuse to have to leave so that they can be there together. So now we're back in the office, and Mr. Yu announces an offsite. And so they're basically going to do this group building activity like in the wilderness. So they're in the wilderness, and they have to play this game. Now I think there are like 5 flags. Each flag determines where you're going to sleep. So I think 5 is the sleeping bag, 4 is the tent. I think the 1 is the camper. So obviously everybody wants to get the 1. So they see Ji-hyuk coming back, and she's soaking wet. So they know at least one of those flags is going to be in the water somewhere or near some water. So Ji-won and Su-mi are off to the side talking. And Su-mi asks her, so where's Min-hwan, because she wanted to use him to get the flag out from the water. And they're talking, and she says to Ji-won, you have to be willing to do whatever you want, to do whatever you need to do to get what you want. And so at this point, Ji-won is walking through the woods, and she's thinking, and she's having a flashback. She's like, well, you sure got everything you wanted in 2023. So eventually she bumps into Mr. Yu, and he's saying that, have you figured out where 1 is? I would have gotten it for you if I had known what it was. And she, basically told him that, basically she appreciates all his help, but that she feels like she needs to do this on her own. So then we flash to Min-hwan, who already got 5, so he already resigned that he's going to be sleeping in the sleeping bag. So Min-hwan, of course, never too far behind. She see him, and then she creates this, damsel in distress situation where she ends up scratching her hand on a bush or some crazy. So he comes to her defense, to her aid, and she ends up asking him if he would, help her. So she's trying to get him to get the flag from the water or whatever. So, of course, Ji-won already knows that the flag is by the water. So she's at the water. She can see the flag. And she's just about to go into the water. Mr. Yu he's reached back to the campsite. And Ji-hyuk and Miss Wang are talking, saying that they just got a report, basically telling people to stay out of the water because the level has risen to a dangerous level, and that people shouldn't go into the water. So now he's trying to run back so that he could make sure she's okay. He get there just as this fool is drowning, and he, saves her, but he is upset, just basically like, why is it so difficult for you to ask for help? Why won't you just let me help you? And she had this really kind of got really emotional, and was like, because I'm not Su-mi. And that is pretty much how this episode ends.